Good evening. Hello, everybody. Hello, Thomas. It's such a pleasure to be now saying hello. Now, before was almost privately, now it's publicly. And it's a privilege to be talking with such an unpredictable filmmaker in certain ways. When you follow the 10 films that are being shown in that films, if any viewer has the chance to see one after the other chronologically or not chronologically, you will immediately realize that we have a filmmaker who has certain topics which in certain ways are always somewhere in what he is looking for or what he is portraying, but at the same time there could be big and radical changes in the poetics, even though that if one sees profoundly and put attention towards the structure and certain kind of things, there are a common secret line among all the films, and perhaps this is what we are about to talk. So thank you very much to the people to thatfilms.com to once again to trust on me. I hope not to betray your confidence, and also especially to Christopher Small, who is the one who is behind all, behind the, even at this moment, behind Thomas and me. So welcome, Thomas, and thank you so much for being with us.
Welcome, Roger. Nice to meet
Uh,
you.
Nice to meet you. If there is certain kind of noises, is the reason is that the only way to be together at this moment was to myself at least. Thomas is in his house. That sometimes he would say, I would say it is also the location of many of his films, although is the off screen of of his location films, because we usually see from the house outside. But me, I am at the airport in Madrid, in fact. And so if this conversation is outstanding, I'm even eager to lose my flight. So let's start. There are 10 films, and if we see the films, I would say there are three kind of films. There are certain kind of essays, documentary essays, always personal, on one hand. Then we have, on the other hand, certain kind of fiction, which I would say, I would dare to say, they could be understood as a kind of cubic fictions. The structure of the fiction are extremely strange as we usually understand fiction. And then there are two films particularly where straight fictions, almost, not exactly, but they are more typical way of understanding fiction. But all films are under the name of one only director, and that name, of course, is Thomas Imbach. So I was thinking maybe to start with the last film you have made. For me, it's one of the most strongest film made in 2020. Not made, shown, because it's a film that you had been working for almost 7 years, and it's one of the films that you have done from the spot of your own house, from your window, in fact. So in this case particularly, what we see is the transformation of the view from your house, which used to be a station, and is sooner, little by little, step by step, replaced by a police center, which is about to be uh, built. What we see is from the very beginning the old building and how the new building is being built. So first of all, you have done a film before, and then we are about to talk about that, which is Day is Done. But I would like to know how was again the idea to repeat the the conception of shooting from your window, and there is certain kind of changes from Day is Done to Nemesis. So let's start with this film. How you conceive the film, it is the reason that you know that the police center of the prison was about to be built, or was something that it happening in the middle that you realize that that was the goal in front of your window?
Actually, with Nemesis, it was quite different than all my other films because Nemesis, I just started out of a duty as a citizen to witness what was happening in front of my window. This police station, they started planning it 2000. So it's a long way back. Nobody really believed that it ever will happen because it was a completely chaotic discussion and quarrel in politics. And so, but the day they started to demolish the old station, I knew I had to do it again. I never wanted to shoot out of my window again, because with Days Done, it was like a gift. Over 15 years, I collected material from my answering machine with short ends from all different films, shooting out of my window, discovering my view. And so at the end, it became a film. It was like a gift. But with Nemesis, I knew something will happen. So I started again because at the beginning, it was the roofs that broke my heart. The roofs, the falling roofs, because these roofs were like waves, like the sea in front of my window. That's also one of the reasons I stayed so long in this studio, because it's very inspiring view. So I started shooting Nemesis with the falling roofs, and then year by year, I had my script in my head. First I missed a lot, and then I said I cannot miss it again. But I shot it also in 35 because I had like the l'habitude, what's the word? L'habitude, I was used to do it in 35 because in 35 I cannot film anything. I can only film when I'm pretty sure this will be in my films. Otherwise it would not be possible. So it helps me from not filming too much. And it's also a nice way of working. You have to send it to the lab. You will see it like a month or 2 months later, the material. So it's a special kind of working. It's not just like shooting out of the window whenever. So, and this was the process started with this. I knew that there will be a big change. Now I look back and I think, the film is like something for the time capsule that they bring up in the film, where they put in the handcuffs and stuff, which is a bit ridiculous. The time capsule in a copper box. And I stopped filming before they're still building it. They're doing now the interiors. I stopped when it was like a raw building, when my workers left the building, when the raw building was there. So.
Yeah, there are many things to be said about the film because it has many layers. One, of course, it could be architecture. Another one could be the architecture related with a certain kind of policies. Then there is the life of the workers that you follow properly, painstakingly. And then we also have the off-screen situations that you incorporate. And I like now to know, when do you begin thinking that it was good for the film to bring towards the view, to bring towards the landscape and what we are watching through the audio, the letters from people who are imprisoned themselves. So that is something which is not strictly connected with the building, because the building, as you have said, is being yet built. But the experience of being in prison, it's more or less, I wouldn't say the same, but there are some similarities. When do you realize that they could work dialectically between a universal experience of being in jail and at the same time the singularity of the situation that you were seeing, that in the future there will be people, 300 people inside that place?
Yeah, it was like a mourning process. I was feeling very melancholic when they tear down the old station, and I also tell in the film that it was the year of a good friend of mine dying of cancer. I remembered other people dying of cancer because this neighbor was like a living body, a long time neighbor. So, and I let myself being in a melancholic mood in the film. So at a certain point, I realized now, look forward, what will be your new neighbors? And then I started doing research, and by chance, I worked with Lisa for another film, and she was doing visits in prison for political reasons. She was visiting refugees awaiting deportation in the airport prison. So we started discussing this, and so she collected like testimonies of these refugees, and I started to work with them at an early stage, at the stage where I also had in mind to include also the political process, and I even had the plan to include politicians with their talks, but I found out that it's far too complicated even for the people here in Zurich to follow the process. And no, I did not transform, but it just a lot fell out of the film. I knew it will not help the film because at the end it's a story about the old world becoming a new world. And the testimonies of these refugees are very emotional also for me, and I even sometimes had them in my mind when I was filming. For example, when I was filming the floods, I was thinking about the guy who tells us about crossing Mediterranean Sea. So it was very inspiring to work with those testimonies. And at the end, there were like an important part of the story, because it really, I was not really tempted, because I knew from my previous films I cannot leave the window. So I do not see everything from my window. I do not see the prison details. I cannot show the viewer any details. I can show the viewer a lot of associations and different perspectives, but I cannot discover the building like a documentary filmmaker. So, but what I could do is like going into the experience of being in prison through these testimonies, and that was very inspiring work.
You also put a lot of attention towards the workers. The workers at the moment they are working, of course, but also the workers where they are not working. Well, they are just the poses or the moments that they are just recreating themselves. And I was wondering how is exactly the perspective you have on that, because I'm sure they don't know at the moment that they are being shot, that they are being filmed, but at the same time, it's on the limits of being going towards something which is in certain ways private, or some kind of privacy and not. So what was your way of moving around from the perspective you have from the window, in order to capture the daily work?
Sure. I was a voyeur, that is for sure, but I was never a hidden voyeur. People could see me, and the workers knew that I'm there because I was like waiting for them in the morning or at noon, especially when they go to eat and go back at 1 o'clock. So they knew me, and they did. After a certain time, sometimes they paid attention, and we laughed or waved, and the workers for me were like, because I knew I'm not so focused on the architecture of this new building, because the architecture is like, it's like any architecture of those kind of Ceausescu buildings. It's just very pretentious. It's planned 10 years ago. I mean, it's not even planned like in our time. It's like a relic from a different historic epoch, And so I knew this is not really my interest. And as I explained before, I could not have all the angles for the architecture. So it was very like inspiring to discover those workers, because I did not wait for them, or I did not count on them that they will be so vivid, so inspiring, so funny, so as I also tell in the film, because they remind me like on non-actors from Pasolini movies, and but only very specific workers, because those workers, they really have to do very, very hard work, with this I don't know the words in English, but when you do concrete work, some of the work you cannot be done by machines, so you need like men that are really strong. So, and it was a pleasure to observe them, yeah. And also it was like a gift when, a morning, on a Friday morning, I planned to leave my house for once for the weekend, and at 10 o'clock I see they're putting like chairs and tables, and I think, what the hell are they preparing? And I find out, oh, they will have a public meal, and it happens to be like the end party of those workers. So I had to postpone my weekend, and I had like the final party of those workers, and it was very yeah, I felt relieved. So they had their party, I can stop my film.
Yeah, and that is an ambiguous moment also, because they are all male. There are many men eating together, and it could easily be the vision of an scene in jail, in a penitentiary. So it's very interesting to see that kind of ambiguity, because workers could be also in certain ways being thought as people who are in certain ways in a certain kind of symbolic jail at the same time. I think that kind of ambiguity is extremely powerful at that moment in the film. Although at the same time you could see there's certain kind of celebration, or certain kind of, there is not a feeling of mourning. There is a feeling of being together. That is the ambiguity also of the shot. Um, there is something which I see, and this goes beyond this particular film and beyond Day is Gone, which is the outstanding importance that it has in your films, the sky, the clouds, the sun, the idea of nature in movement, plus the animal world. Whatever you are doing, and the animal world, and whatever you are doing, always there is a kind of, I showed this, but I showed that. Like there should be always a kind of, let's say, a kind of dialectical dance between our world and that world, which is not our world, but we are in that world. And I would like to learn, how do you think about that? Because in every film you have that particularly shots which are not just transitional shots. It seems to be something more than transitional shots, and also the presence of animals. There are always animals in your films, and here that magnificent fog in the middle, fox in the middle of the night or the middle of the daylight. I don't know exactly at what time is it. That. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course, I mean, in Nemesis, it was when I started like to, as I told before, to build up a scenario in my head. I had the plan to build up the zone within the fence into a whole own universe, and for that I need like I need the sky, I need heaven and hell, I need all what belongs to build a world, So, and I was very happy when nature took over, and of course I was very sensible to film animals. And although I did not, I was not aware that the fox is around, so it was really by chance that I could film in even more than 3 times. And the sky is, of course, it's in these two films, like Days Done and Nemesis, clouds and sky have a very specific, also in Lens with this mountain, they have a specific presence. And I stress it also by filming it with 3 images per second, which it gives the clouds some movement. So I think it comes from a very early process of building up like an own world and not just filming the world as it is, you know. So therefore, and sky, it can be very inspiring and abstract, and you can start dreaming with skies and having your own thoughts. So I think it's about that it gives, you know, maybe to something completely different. You know, half of the work I'm doing is producing my films, because the kind of films I'm doing, there are no producers for those kind of films. So producing for me is like a crucial part of the work. And so sometimes I look for the, not the easy way, but working with skies and nature, and especially nature. I mean, not only skies, but in all the films I have a lot of nature. It's a very good medium to convey the inner life, you know, and to reflect moods and emotions. And I think it comes also from this. Maybe it's not a lack of you know, in a big studio you build up your own world. So, but I cannot build it up because I work with very limited means. So I have to find it in the real world and to compose it so it becomes something new.
But it is also something that it happens in Ghetto, for instance. It happened in Lens, and it happens in. I was a Swiss banker, so the importance of nature is quite ostensible, and it is quite clear that it's not just a question of, as you said, there is some kind of abstraction. There is a kind of recapturing how to be the perception of the world, and because it's truly significant. And I was watching the whole films one after the other. It's quite, it's a regularity in your poetics, the way that nature is being incorporated in the narrative or in any portrait or in any essay. And I think it's you have a certain way of how you frame, for instance, the skies, the movement of the clouds, which is absolutely particular. You know, there are many filmmakers who has done things in order to understand the movement of the clouds and so on. But in your case, it is, there is a kind of, let's say, an Imbach grammar towards that. And I think it's one of the biggest pleasure that your films give the viewers as such. So that is the reason that I wanted to stress. There is something very interesting when you compare Nemesis towards the Day is Done, which is how is the relationship between the inwards and the outwards. Of course, the camera is always outside, so it's from inside to outside in the same way that Mr. Hitchcock has done in Rear Window in certain ways. But the interesting thing is, especially in Days Gone, is the use of the audio record messages, which becomes a kind of of narrative, not only about your personal or familiar life, but also about your work, about daily things, friendship, institutions which are willing or not giving money. So again, how was that? When do you realize that a way to incorporate the outside inside was throughout audio, particularly sound, and in that sense, the messages?
Uh, this image and sound grew together over the years. I did not work on it. That's why Days Done for me, it's like an unconscious film. It grew together. I worked for it the last year in the editing room, but I knew from an when I started collecting those music cassettes from with the answering machine, I was not aware that I will keep them for a film. I was just, yeah, in my nature. I mean, it was obvious. You don't throw away those testimonies or those voices, because already then in the end of the 80s I had nice messages with nice sounds, and it was, this decade of messages on the answering machine. That was a very special, that was kind of new then, you know. And uh, and so when I started like really edit the film and finance the film, these messages helped a lot to structure a story, because Days Done, it's not about what is happening outside of the window. I just use it to show a life passing in front of the window, it's, whereas Nemesis is completely the opposite. I'm really oriented to what is happening outside. I mean, I comment on it, and but it's different. It's very different perspective. It's Whereas Days Done really was a very was an emotional landscape I built with all those images, and I didn't know until the very end of like the 2 last years. I knew what I was doing. Before, I was just exploring and finding out, and playing around with short ends, and step by step I started to realize. And so, because I never thought, let's do a film out of my window, because it feels quite pretentious to do it, so, but when you have done it, you start to discover that there is something useful in this material.
And at the same time, it, it is quite interesting because both films are there are resemblances, but there are big differences. And as you said, you have mentioned that difference very clearly. But there is something together which goes one from the other, which is the use of music, uh, which is quite important. The music you pick uh, and the moments that you have chosen to incorporate songs. So, how was the rationale behind those picks, those songs? In one case, there are many songs by Bob Dylan, for instance. Not in the other, there are few. So, can you express, because music again in your films are quite important and are not used particularly as we usually see music in films. It's not exactly a way to indicate or point it out what kind of feeling you have to have, if not something different. So can you say something about that?
uh, in these two films, songs are like characters, and I respect them as as full characters, and they speak to us, and these are songs that are quite different. In Days Done, they're really like songs about the inner world, whereas Days in Nemesis there is different songs, and for me it's not like film music. It's just I like to incorporate them as my friends. They talk to me. But there is other film music in Nemesis with a trio that is close to the sound design, which is music with no voice. But also this music, it's close to the sound design. So, but it's very different. As songs, there, yeah, I cannot say more. In all my films, I have some songs. I just try to bring in my it's part of my darlings, you know. But these songs are not my darlings. It's not that I discover them, you know. For every film, I discover new songs, and for Glaubenberg, My Brother, My Love, these songs are even composed only for the film. It's not that I have like songs that I will bring up in this or that film. I discover them because they have a nice way of talking to us within a film, and I feel it gives me pleasure to build up space for a song in a film.
The idea that, as you have mentioned, that those songs are friends or something like that. Because sometimes I think to quote something is to bring a memory which is connected with certain kind of feelings that we have with friends. So I like that idea as you began the answer. I would like to shift for a while the perspective, left these two films particularly, and go to the three of your fictions, which are extremely strange. Particularly the strangest one, at least for me, is Happiness is a Warm Gun. But I would say that it could be also said that I was a Swiss banker. It's also a very strange film. And lends in certain ways, a little bit less. But the three together, for me, when I was at the beginning trying to figure out how to indicate or how to describe those three films together, I get that idea, or I express that idea that for me there is a kind of cubist fiction in the sense they are fragmented. You are not exactly know. There is no typical linear narrative. It is not also a circular narrative. It's a defragmented narrative. So I would like to ask you, how do you see those three films together? Because they have a particular way of break the narrative as we usually understand the line in a narrative.
You know, for Happiness, it's a very specific approach. For Happiness is a Warm Gun, it was one of those films that came to me as a flash. I read about this incident that the general was killing his girlfriend and then himself. And I knew in the moment I was reading this in the newspaper that struck me. I will have to do something with that. And I knew that I'm not interested in a biography or in staging part of their life. So it was connected. Yeah, and I knew I think the moment I read it, the moment I thought about it, I knew the title. Happiness is that was my scenario, was Happiness is a Warm Gun. That was my friend, you know, because of course I knew the song, but it had nothing to do with the song. But the feeling of the song, or all the associations, and so that was my script. Yeah, and I started, and then I the story is then very simple. It's the moment where the bullet enters the skull until she dies. You know what happens in this milliseconds. You know, and it's based on the myth that when you die, you see your life. So that was like a very strong basic structure I had, and I built the film around that. And it was not my first fiction film, but it was my first fiction film with such strong actors, let's say it like that. And at this moment, I felt like a beginner of working with actors, but I also looked forward to working with actors, because in Well Done and Ghetto I was like becoming too impatient to wait until things happen, whereas with the actors I could like provoke action and get things going. And by doing that, I decided not to film the scenes. I decided to film from morning, from makeup until in the evening when we say goodbye. So it was a bit a crazy experience. We filmed like the whole process also, which then was more for the other film, Happy Too. Yeah, but also there is lots of material that does not really belong to a fiction scene also in the first film. And yeah, it's a cubist film, you can say that, I have no problem. And it's for me it's very far away. Yeah, it's but I still respect it as in this concept of I mean, it had to be mind blowing. So so that's why we were looking like for this or that. Does it work with this conception of what happens when the skull and when the bullet enters the skull? What happens? Of course, there is also not only this like technical reason. There is also like I felt like, because when this happened, people did not say this is a femicide. You know, this word didn't exist in those times. When this happened, people were like saying, even like very, very prominent German psychologists were saying this is like either the Chinese secret service because they were engaged for the Tibet cause, or this is like the mafia of the nuclear industry. And I felt very provoked by these helpless explanations, where it was very clear that this explosion happened between the two of them. And so there was also a strong motivation to dig into the relationship between Petra and Gerd, of course.
There is a lot of context, political context behind it. In fact, you use some footage material, and then even the Dalai Lama is in the film at the very end. But I was thinking, like, I can connect with I was Swiss banker, which again there is this kind of repetition. Although the reasons behind it's different, because in Happiness is a worm gun, as you said, it's a kind of imitating that hypothetical process in our mind, that the moment before dying there is a kind of glimpse about all different moments in our life. But again, there are intense period of a lifetime what we saw, and it's exactly the same, at least even hypothetically, about I was a Swiss banker. Can you go a little bit about that film, because it's more funny, it's more ludic in certain ways. The other has an existential. Yeah, but I would like to listen to you about this.
It's a very different approach. I was a Swiss banker is like completely different. It's like I was a Swiss banker is like let's go on out and make a light summer film, like a butterfly film. You know, it's really the opposite. It's really and and I was a Swiss banker belongs to Lens. You know, it's a summer film of Lens. It's the flip side of the coin of Lens. It's and I started doing casting scenes, and in the second summer we completed the scenes, and it's also a bit reflecting the production process because I could have done a more harmonic film, you know. I mean, it's a fairy tale and it's a bit fragmented, as you say, and a bit cubist because there is also a lot of material change of the video material and the nice 35 shots, and this is not justified in every moment because I didn't have any budget for this film, like for many of my films, so I just had to do it the way I could, and. But it started with a very spontaneous excursion, and it ended up we cannot give in so easily. We have to go through. We have to swim through all the lakes until we dive up in Geneva. So I mean. It was a wonderful experience and I learned a lot, but I could have done better with a proper production in this film because it was, it was a shame that we could not do everything. But at the same time, maybe this is the charm of the film, that it's not perfect, that it's, what can I say? I mean, a lot of people hate me for this film because a lot of people think it's a superficial film. But I don't think they understand. I think it's not a superficial film. I think it has a very grounded, emotional layer is a bad word, but you know what I mean. I mean, not. I even died in this film because when I was doing underwater camera work, I was like putting a rope on my chest, and the rope was getting into the motor of the boat, and it took me under the boat, and happily I could lift the boat with my shoulders because the water was not so deep there, but like 10 meters further out the lake, I would not have had ground to because I was. So it was. I'm telling that because just to give, for me it was not just. It was a very light-hearted start, but there was a lot of work and. Se recuerda la necesidad de what can I say? I still love it.
Yeah, I think it's a lovely film. It's a kind of male fantasy, but it's a lovely way to express a male fantasy, which is not a macho type fantasy. It's different that one from the other. And there's a lot of beautiful shots, like a pleasure to the eye to watch certain kind of movement and shots. And I think this is something that also is part of cinema. And let's go to Lens, because Lens it's as you say, could be seen as an opposite film. It's easily to follow in terms of narrative, in the sense that you could understand more or less, but it's a kind of a self-conscious modernist way to see the film, because it's a filmmaker in a film. At the same time, it's about an adaptation of a novel. The novel is by Buchner, at the same time brings up the name of the two characters. So there is, it seems to be easy in sense to what is going on to follow. It's a kind of family reunion, but at the same time, we see that the character is almost on the verge of losing himself. So, could you tell us a little bit these kind of layers, which are interconnected in the film? And once again, I have to say it and add the importance that the snow and mountains have in these films are particularly ostensible again.
Are particularly
Sensible. It's quite clear. You see it. You know, like it's part of the interaction between character, place, and family.
um, Lenz is a very small book. It's like a diamond of German literature. It's very famous in Germany, and it's a fragment, and it's not an original piece of literature, because what Büchner did, he rewrote a diary of a pastor in Alsace,
Alsatian.
Alsatian, yeah, in an Alsatian village. He the German poet Lenz was visiting him, and he had like mental problems, and he noted like in his diary, and at the end he had to send him away. The pastor had to send Lenz away. So Büchner took this diary and rewrote in his condensed novella. And for me, that was a very important piece I had on me when I was young, when I was 18, 19. So it was like a friend. Yeah, it was like something very close to me. And to be honest, I would have to, at this moment, I don't remember when it hit me, because mostly I remember when a film hits me, because when a film hits me, I do it. I don't have like 10 projects and I only do one. I mostly do them. But with Lenz, at the moment, I would have to search. What I remember is that I was doing research in the Alsace, in the Vosges, in the mountains of the Alsatia, where the original story happened, and I drove there. It's like 2 hours from Zurich, and it's like the pre-Alps, it's like the mountains, and it was a clear day, and I could see the Alps in Switzerland, the white strip, of our Alps. And I remember like having the idea of moving this story to more altitude, because myself, when I was a kid, I was a lot in the Alps for skiing. So, and this gave the story a personal boost, that I brought up my characters to the glacier, and so. And I met Milan there the first time. I did because since then we are friends, and he did work on other films with me as well. But that was the first time with Lenz, and that was a very special experience to work with him on this. And the other main idea of my concept was that I had like a film with a crazy poet and a pastor. And in my story, the pastor is the son of the poet. So that was like the crucial, like modern, or my own way of telling it. Whereas the poet is like looking for peace with his son, yeah, and with his ex-wife, with his family, with his, yeah. And so the story grew quite organically, uh, and but it was also shot in a very limited way. With like I had like my DOP Jörg and 5 or 6 assistants, so that was not like a big film crew. And but it gave me the opportunity to include also the Matterhorn, the mountain, what's in English the Cervin, as a main character, as this obsession. And
I had a kind of curiosity. There is a moment that Lance is reading a Kurt Cobain book. It's, all his works, as far as I understood in German. Why you have include that? Because it's, and then there is a gig that he used sometimes that it's a blonde one. So do you know that, or it was just by chance?
both. I mean, no, I did not plan. It was his book, but I did not cut it. If it would have been something that would be disturbing for the story, I would have cut it out or made it invisible or whatever. So I included it. But it was not, we did not plan to include Kurt Cobain, because when you start to include those things, then you mostly do too much and it gets too pretentious and too, because the reason you saw it, you were, yeah, a lot of people don't see it because it's really on the edge. It's really, you have to know it to see it. You know, people who don't know him would not discover that. So, and yeah, I like those accidents. Yeah. And there is a lot of, when I'm working, there's a lot of documentary moments, you know, when the Danish girl and the Swiss guy coming in the chalet, and Lenz is starting to interview them, and I mean, this was a wonderful scene, and the reason she is Danish makes him asking her about Lars von Trier. How is his stay in Denmark? And he is like expecting her to say, this is a crazy poet, a crazy filmmaker. No, she's saying the opposite. Yeah, we all love him. And he's so fucking jealous. So that was like gifts of reality in together with Milan, with the actor and the story. So these are wonderful moments that things come together.
Yeah, yeah, it's also another reference for the viewers. If you see the films, many times there are filmmakers quoted not by you but by characters. Wong Kar Wai in in Nemesis, for instance. But there are always some.
Based on, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go
But this is an
to.
actress this is an actress telling me about that she has seen In the Mood for Love. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and she's absolutely crazy about it.
Yeah, she has discovered it. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, and in that case, she's right. That is an outstanding film. Um, let's go a little bit to the most paradox films that you have done when you follow your whole work, because they look, at least from the first sight, it could be seen as most regular fiction films. One is a period film, which is Mary Queen of Scots, based on a Stephen Wake novel. And then you have My Brother, My Love, which are connected in terms of there are family bonds on the core of the stories. One is from the past, one is from the beginning, from our times, or is contemporary. And the first question is, these one are more, there are some exceptions which are connected with dreams, or particularly when there are dreams, the characters' dreams in both films, then you see certain kind of sequences that you could have seen it before in the other films you have made in fiction. But otherwise, they are more linear narrative. You could understand more easily, so to speak. So I wonder what makes you to 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 embrace these two stories and to do those films like that.
It's hard to talk about two of them because
They're different.
they're
Yes.
different, yeah. And I mean, Mary was, of course, something crazy as an idea to, as a Swiss director, to have a period film with Mary Queen of Scots. But my pitch at the beginning was women, horses, and landscapes made me think of Mary. And there is a very famous play of Schiller we all know here, which is even known in the Anglo-Saxon world. But I didn't like this play, so a friend gave me this Stefan Zweig book, and this made the project become alive, because he had a very specific take on Mary Queen of Scots that is very different from the English historians. So, and she started to interest me more and more, and I started to write a script. Yeah, and that's why the film. I mean, it's of course it's the film with the highest budget, but I made so far, but I planned to do three films. I planned to do a film on Mary in France, Mary in Scotland, and Mary in England in prison. But I had to cook it down to one film because it was too megalomaniac, and even this one film was jeopardized because I was having problems in. First we tried to do it in Ireland and then in Scotland, and at the end I shot like the actors the scenes in a Swiss castle, which happened to be a very great location. uh, yeah, it was. I met a character that was close to me personally, and I was like impressed of this very dense story, and of how Stefan Zweig interpreted it as from the psychological way of looking at it. Whereas for the English people, Mary is the French lady. She's the adulteress. She is like a prostitute. She's not being considered for serious.
Hmm.
Serious is Elizabeth, and so they never really take her for even in this latest film, in this Hollywood film, Elizabeth is much more interesting character. So, and yeah, that's was quite a challenge, but I liked to delve into something completely different for also for to to work in a period, and the production design was very reduced. We used a lot of existing production design of existing locations, so that was a great experience to build up a film together with almost no studio buildings, a period film from the 16th 15th century. And Glaubenberg is this is the original title, Glaubenberg. It's the mountain in the film. It's the, I mean, one of the main locations in the film. It's called Glaubenberg. Uh, this is like a very personal story I worked on from when I was a boy and my sister was a girl, and I discovered by chance these 3 pages from Ovid in the Metamorphosis of Biblis and Kaunos, which made the project, which gave the project a lot of dynamics, because I discovered my own story in a 2,000-year-old text of 3 pages, and it was so inspiring and so, wow, what the hell? How could he write that down 2,000 years ago? It felt completely my story. So, and yeah, because yeah, a lot of people say, why did you leave out the brother so much? And yeah, I followed very much this original story of Ovid, which really focuses on this obsession of the sister, of her losing it. And it was a film I had to do for my own. Whereas other films start completely outside of my own life. You know, it's not always the same. It can be very different. Whereas this film is a story that grew within 30 years until I found out like how to tell it.
It is very interesting because when you follow all the films you have done, it's easily the one that you could think is not the most personal, but now you have expressed that it's one of the most personal. But it's quite surprising, and it makes a twist towards the film, which is, I think, for me, it has been a very interesting answer from yours, because it's a film which is, it's a very interesting way to understand incest, like as an experience, no? And how a psychology can be fixed towards the desire of what is near us. But beyond that, it's interesting that you said in that sense that it's one of your most personal films. Um, let's go for two things that we haven't yet spoken, which is two films which has kind of relationship. I mean, Ghetto on one hand, and the other one, Well Done. There are films which are different because I would say Ghetto is about the youngers, the kids, or the teenagers, or the ones who are about not to be teenagers anymore, and they have to assume that they have to go somewhere and to be in the world, in the, as we nowadays say it, which is a wrong way just to say that only, how they will be able to get into the market. And the other film, Well Done, is fully about people who are on the market, people who work on marketing, people who work on the numbers of capitalism or economy. So in that sense, the two films could be put in dialogue on one hand, but they are different at the same time. One of the main differences, it's again, you don't see in any moment during Well Done almost something beyond the place they work. Like if they were just people who they are what they do as a workers. The other, the youngers, they're always again here again as we were talking at the beginning, you see the teenagers, but there is always something about nature, some mountains again, the sky, the environment as such. So there is always a kind of dialogue between their lives and the outside. But for the people who are all adults working on the capital system as such, there is no environment. They're always in the same place almost, working, feeling that they belong to that kind of machine. So that is something interesting to compare. I don't know how do you see that. But the other thing which makes the two films together is the approach you have towards each character. You're always inside the character, near with the camera. near with the close-up in the faces, like if you were following about the faces and try to capture the subjectivity of those the young on one hand and the adults on the other hand. I don't know how you see that kind of both films and what I am saying to you.
Yeah, I mean, I can completely relate to what you say, because in Well Done, it was what I, at the beginning of our conversation, was trying to explain, to build up an own world. Whereas in Well Done, it was the attempt to go beyond the facades of the everyday life of the banker cliche of a Zurich bank, and it, you know, my goal was to build up a new cosmos, and to build it up. There is a lot of the locations outside of the offices when people are at home, but I try to show it like they work at home also. It's like the complete coming together of working and being private. What we are doing today, you talking to me on the airport, we are everywhere. There is no private zone anymore. And so this gives the impression, and of course there is like the model film for Well Done was Modern Times. I mean, this is, the more I could build the whole thing as a machine, the more it works. That's why I also chose this location, this bank, which is a very special kind of architecture. It's like a hexagon with a center for the computers. Were at the early 90s, the computers were much bigger than today. They needed like buildings, and but Well Done was also an ethnographic approach that I said, let's go and look at how they work, like we go to see an African tribe. We don't know anything of them. We discover them. What are they doing? Whereas in Ghetto, things were a bit different. Things were like, I realized that there are young people younger than me. And this made me think, hey, I do not belong to the young generation anymore. And I started to, I had my first baby then, in 95, while I was shooting this film. And in Ghetto, it was discovering a new generation. It was discovering my, what I missed from my years then. I tried to find it back again with the generation of today. That was like my motivation. That was also the motivation for the casting, because I was traveling from school to school all over the region, and I thought of completely different villages or towns to stay in than where I stayed. It's actually a very rich neighborhood, but the main actors or the main characters are from very normal families. So, and this also gives this this contrast of this like normal people in not posh families, but these wonderful vistas with these natures, almost like from publicity posters. And the relationship with the non-actors was very different. Whereas in Well Done, we worked like in a business schedule, and we showed up at 9 a.m. or whatever. Whereas in Ghetto, we we hanged out and waited for them because it was not possible to have like a schedule with kids 16 years old. And also the casting was was done while I was shooting, and some people I. But that was also in Well Done. I had some people planned to, in all these films I did like proper castings. That was for me like the crucial thing. To start one of those films, I needed to have my characters, and I did castings. I filmed them, and I built up a relationship in the way that time was passing. And in Well Done, there were some people saying no, thank you, because they started to realize what happens, that they're working in this hell, and that this will be that they will be serving the hell, and that they didn't want to be in the film anymore. And in Ghetto was a bit different. Some got scared. Some even I was not so interested anymore, and some I learned while we were shooting, like the two guys, the one with the drugs and the one with the selling the chestnuts. So, and both films were like long processes over 9 months, where it was really like hunting in the way of waiting until something, not something happens, but it was producing a lot of material. Yeah, it was not, I could not direct them. When I started to direct them, it was completely, the air was completely out. There was no tension anymore. I found out I cannot, it doesn't work to direct, to say, do this telephone for me, or like stupid ideas, to wanting something. I realized I cannot want something from them. They have to give it to me for nothing. So, and that was a great experience, but I found out it's so time consuming, and so it needs a lot of energy to do those films. And then also in the 90s, it was like new to work with those small cameras, and private television came up, and but people nowadays, you could not work like that anymore. It's because with the cell phones and everything is so completely different. So, and I lost interest in working. I could not work anymore like that. I wouldn't feel good to have those approaches, because they were like innocent, and I used them as characters. It worked, and I also showed them the film before I was publishing it, and it worked out good for all of them. But still, it was connected to this moment in history in the mid 90s, when this was still possible.
Very interesting the way that you think on the use of the close-ups, because usually close-ups are very easily to be done, but not usually are being thought properly. There is an instance, for instance, there is a moment in Well Done that you follow the reaction of a woman's face, the reaction even of her eyes. And it's outstanding, something that we have lost nowadays, because everybody's doing close-ups, everybody's doing selfies, everybody's doing images. But in this film, you still have a hunch what a camera can bring from the person, that even the person herself or himself might not know. And that scene is outstanding in that, because you follow the gestures by step, and the camera is stealing the inner secrets, the secret thoughts in certain ways. So you have that feeling, no? And I think that there is a masterful use of the close-up. I wanted to say that because I really appreciate that nowadays, to see that it was the close-up as a grammar it's still a powerful tool, but sometimes we don't know how to use it. And I think in this film, it's possible to be rediscover what a close-up can do.
Great, thanks.
Um, I would like just to do the last question. We have been talking for 75 minutes, which is quite enough sometimes. Um, it is, how do you see yourself in the in Swedes film tradition, if we can say, if there is a Swiss tradition? Because for me, you're a strange bird on the Swiss panorama cinema. It's very difficult to see. I can see some let's say influence in your work, but at the same time it's quite singular. So I was wondering to myself, from where is this Mr. Thomas Imbach coming from? So if you have to say that, if you're there to, of course, how do you see yourself as a filmmaker in the history of your country's cinema and beyond?
This will take another 75 minutes. You know, 2 weeks ago, I was doing a pilgrimage from Zurich to Lake Geneva. I don't know if you know who lives at Lake Geneva in Roll.
Yeah, Godard.
God of Cinema lives there. And it's one of my new projects. It's about this 40 years of obsession. And the other answer is, yeah, that's what you're asking me. I was asking myself when I started all this in the late 70s, early 80s. There was no film school in Switzerland. I was going to New York for a short period of time, but I felt I'm whether Jarmusch or Scorsese, New York belongs to them. Even then, I'm a Swiss peasant. And yeah, on Lake Geneva there is somebody very active in the 80s also, and so. But you're right. I always felt a bit alone in the Swiss film tradition because there is none. Swiss film started in the Second World War with some producers from Vienna helping out the Swiss army producing films in the defense of our population from the Nazis. Geistige Landesverteidigung. These were our first. We don't have any silent movies in Switzerland. We don't have this. We don't have any grandfathers. It started then in the 50s. And then it started again in the 60s with the filmmakers from the Romandie, the French part, and it's even more complicated with the German part because our fiction films cannot be understood in Germany. Our market is not Germany, whereas the market of the we are a very small group, and I felt like Switzerland is being a third world country in terms of cinema, and it's about to change now. There is a lot going on. There's a lot of new generations moving in, and that's good. But you know, I will tell in this new project. I will tell about when I was young. I had like certain ideas, and I followed them. Not, I mean, I forgot this obsession of Godard. For 20 years, I was not really close to what he was doing, but still. And the other thing is producing, because I never was compatible with producers. I never really gave in doing something producers would appreciate. So this is also the stubbornty to just do what I really am convinced I have to do, which you have to pay a price also. But And on the other hand, Switzerland can be very inspiring in terms of it's like a nice film studio. You know, it's you travel 20 minutes and everything is changing. And at the same time, our social reality is disturbing in a way that it's hard to reflect in a film. You know, it's not like in in a lot of other places on the world where you see it on the street what is happening. So it's but I think this cliche of Switzerland is also melting down a bit. This chocolates, clocks, and everything. It's melting down because I'm happy about it because we're having more serious topics now. Our world is changing at the moment, and I think we don't have time anymore to talk about whether Switzerland is in or out.
That's good. Well, on behalf of that films, I think we all appreciate it that you have been with us. That the 10 films of yours are being shown. I think it's a big possibility to appreciate your perspective on nature, on narrative, on faces, on young and adults and dreams. And I think it could be a big surprise for our viewers now and the viewers for the future and the regular visitors of thatfilms.com because your cinema is is known, but it should be more known by much more people. And I think it's one of the gems that are still to be embraced as cinema such, a filmmaker like you. And I will never forget the chimes in your films. That's what I love about your films. Chimes, clouds, flights, people, and so on. Thank you so much, Mr. Thomas Imbach, for being with us. Thank you, all the viewers who have been with all of us, and thank you, Christopher Small, to have picked me to be together with this one of the most, for me, fundamental filmmakers that we are still have to appreciate as he deserves. Thank you, and bye
Thank you
bye
very
to
much,
all.
Roger. It's an honor. Thank you very much.